had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hello, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I know what we're all thinking. The weekend, we finally get to practice. We get to practice the cello. All we need are words of inspiration, inspiring ideas the day before, 5 o'clock on Friday. So maybe we even can get in some practicing yet this evening. So that's the idea here. And this week, I'm very delighted to be joined by special guest Charlie Rasmussen. How are you, Charlie?
I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you today?
Doing great, doing great. Glad to hear you are too. So let's just talk a little bit about you and the cello and what has inspired you. You were inspired to take up the cello as a middle schooler. Is that correct?
Actually, I started a little earlier than that.
Okay.
I actually started in second grade. There was a string quartet that came to our school. And so I told my mother that I wanted to play. Actually, I didn't know what it was called at the time. So I said I want to play that instrument. And she kind of had to go through and say, was it this one, this one, this one? And it turned out to be the cello. And I started with a local string teacher, Linda Oya. And so for a few years before I began studying with you.
All right. Yeah, and I got the privilege of teaching you for a while. Before then, you went first to Luther in Iowa. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I did. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, I went to Luther College in Iowa and then North Carolina, Greensboro, UNCG for a master's degree. And I did Suzuki Teacher Training Studies at the University of Denver as well.
All right, right. The cello library at University of North Carolina, Greensboro is a very distinctive place, isn't it?
It is.
I was going to say it's the only place in the world that I've ever gotten to talk to the cello librarian. May I speak to the cello librarian? And they have somebody.
Yes.
Say a couple things about that holding, would you?
Sure. Yeah. So the University of North Carolina, Greensboro has a very large collection of cello music, and it was started by the person who was the professor at the time, Elizabeth Cowling, and she started it by getting her teachers materials, Luigi Silva's, and then from there the collection kept growing. And so, today, if you are to visit, you have to go to the main library. It's not in the music building, but they have a special, a special archive for it, so to speak, where all of the files are. And if you want to go and look at something, make sure to let them know in advance that you're coming, because they have to go and pull the files. And it has a lot of music. And one of the things that's really significant about the collection, too, is that there's a lot of cello pedagogues who have additions of pieces in there. So you can look at their fingerings and their bowings and things like that. And so it's a really interesting, it's a fantastic collection. And it keeps growing, too. It's by no means is it done growing. It seems like every few years there seems to be a new collection that comes its way.
Yes, I agree. I got to spend a week there, and they're very generous with the collection too. Just snap photos of all the pieces that you later want to, so that you don't have to take copious notes. All they ask is if you share it, you just give credit for them being the place that housed it. It's very generous of them. And then you came back to Wisconsin. I was very glad. And then you started working at the Milwaukee Conservatory.
Oh, yeah, Wisconsin Conservatory.
Excuse me.
That's Milwaukee. Okay. That's okay. It's in Milwaukee, yes.
Yes. And promptly started recording some CDs. You have the one that first came out was Dalabaco.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. And I really like your sound in particular on that CD. And then the duo CD was just last year that it came out with Anton. And that was Help me out. Gia.
Giordani, Tommaso
Giordani.
Giordani. Yeah.
Giordani. Again, neither one of them names that we necessarily think of on a daily basis, but worth having discovered and recorded and explored. And I imagine you always probably have the next recording project in the queue. What are you working on next?
Well, that's a really good question. Actually, right now I don't have like a CD project in the works, but I actually recently have done some YouTube channel recordings just to kind of bolster my YouTube channel for both Baroque Cello and Viola da Gamba. So I've been working on getting some videos up. I mean, of course, there certainly will be something, I'm sure, down the road. And for the Giordani, the way that we decided to record those was because there wasn't a recording of them that we were able to find. And Anton and I had been playing them for, a couple years, and programming them on various concerts. We both play in the Wisconsin Baroque Ensemble. And so, and since there wasn't a recording, we thought, well, maybe we should record these pieces because they're beautiful cello duos. They're very classical, very, I don't know, I think they're very attractive pieces, very easy to listen to.
Yes, yeah. Now, you mentioned what it was that drew you to cello in second grade, that visiting string quartet. Mm-hmm. What is it that particularly turned you on to early music?
That's a great question. For many years, when I grew up, my mother was a music educator. And so needless to say, she had quite a large collection of records and CDs. And she was a very big fan of Bach. And I remember distinctly listening to lots of Bach. And so then when I was young, she would also get CDs for me. So when I started playing cello, she got a lot of Yo-Yo Ma CDs. And I remember distinctly listening to like Simply Baroque, and then Simply Baroque 2, and I really liked those. Later on, learning that it was Ton Koopman and the Amsterdam Baroque and his ensemble that recorded that. And so, I mean, I always enjoyed listening to Baroque music, and I didn't really dive into it until graduate school. But again, I mean, I think that it's a great thing to explore and continue to learn about. I mean, it's amazing how much repertoire there is that doesn't often get heard or played all that often, and there's some really great pieces out there.
It's true. It's a staggering amount of repertoire. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think, okay, I've gotten about to the end of it, and no, then you uncover some more. So, and I think that's also a very good point that could be the gem of inspiration for some listeners as far as just really checking out more than just maybe some of the Bach or Handel or Vivaldi that they've heard, and start to explore it more, and then to try playing on a early music instrument. Sometimes people are amazed by how much they are drawn to it. But in your case, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, a good way to kind of dive into it. I mean, because there's different levels of how you want to dive into it. The first thing I would actually suggest is just getting a Baroque bow. I think that that's something that is, and there are Baroque bows out there that are not all that expensive. I believe that Char Music has developed a pretty decent Baroque bow with Rachel Barton Pine. I think she kind of helped engineer it, and I think it's around $100. It's between $100 and $150, so it's not really that much. And then something that you should do too is, if you want to explore some early music, is start with pieces that you haven't learned on modern cello. And the reason for it is because if you play a piece that you've learned, then you're going to fall into the habits of what you know and how you know to play the piece. So some good starting points are Vivaldi sonatas are great to work on. So maybe pick one that you haven't played before. And of course, I would highly recommend get a critical edition. So I recommend the Bärenreiter for the Vivaldi sonatas. And if you want some solo pieces, Gabriele Ricercars are great to play. There's also a really nice canon for two cellos. It's such an iconic piece. And let's see. I also recommend, there are some toccatas by a composer, Francesco Cipriano or Scipriani. He has 3 different names that he'll go by. Those are some other pieces that I think are really nice to look at. And those are solo unaccompanied works. But again, try it with a Baroque bow. Try no end pin. And of course, you can watch lots of tutorials online. Or find a teacher or something, or somebody who can kind of guide you that direction. When I started, I was very fortunate actually, because I started with a great Baroque cellist, Brent Wisek, who taught at Chapel Hill, and I met him after a concert I was at there, and he said, because I had a friend who was studying with him, and he said, I've heard that you have some interest in Baroque cello. I'm teaching at this workshop this summer. Do you want to come? And I was, of course, sign me up. So, and I haven't looked back since. But yeah, so I would say that, that those are some good ways to kind of, just to kind of maybe dabble in some early music performance practice. And of course, listen to listen to recordings. Mm-hmm.
Or Charlie, come up with your own stuff.
Yeah, that's
right.
True.
Okay, so we've had over the years, the various students that have been really drawn to early music. I'm thinking the past couple in particular have not been very fond of improvising. But you have found that you are keen to improvise in the classical style, in that Baroque style. So for example, did you know that you kind of had the improvisational bug before you were drawn to early music, or did that early music help to uncover that?
Early music definitely helped. I was not much of an improviser before that, to be totally honest. And, and actually part of it was I started working on improvisation, just actually a few years ago. And I did it as sort of an exercise in learning, because a lot of the pieces were written in very improvisatory styles, and composers would improvise too. So I kind of started off with some pretty straightforward forms, so like toccatas, preludes, things like that. And what I would try to do would be challenge myself to come up with different ideas. One of the things I remember my graduate professor would talk about this for improvisation. He would say, it's not that there's endless possibilities, but you're actually choosing between different routes that you can go. And because, and especially in Baroque improvisation, there are things that will work and things that don't necessarily work. So then from there, then I started trying to work on it in dances. And what I do actually, more so than anything else, is I'll often add into pieces that are already written, but often that are short. So like some Baroque dances, for example, like there's a short collection of works by a Neapolitan composer, Giulio Ruvo, really great composer. If you don't know his pieces, check him out. But there's a lot of opportunity to add things into some of his pieces. He has some tarantellas, a chaconne. There's plenty of opportunity to do that. So often my improvisation will be adding things into kind of those already existing pieces.
So that may be the very avenue that anyone listening to this and hoping for inspiration, but who has previously not gone down the road of improvisation in the past because they think it's not for them. If they take an existing piece and treat it like, okay, what else might be added to it? What if it didn't stop where it stops? Or what if this particular sequence continues? And then it's maybe a little bit less scary and a little bit more of a fun adventure that they might enjoy.
Absolutely. And I think a really great place to start with that are fermatas. Use fermatas like in Bach cello suites and things like that. And of course, this notion of cadenza, in the classical area, you have a fermata, which would mean, there would be a cadenza, which would be a little bit longer. In Bach's time, cadenzas could be quite short, could just be a couple notes. So I would recommend, try to explore a little bit and see if you can come up with something. And it doesn't have to be complicated. And actually that was important for me because I did not have a lot of confidence with it. So I started off by just adding in little things. And then later on, I felt more comfortable to improvise on a larger scale.
Excellent. Well, some of my questions as far as advice or inspiration or favorite cello pieces that you're listening to, you bake those right into the responses, which is great. Though, do you have any? We've been talking specifically about early music and improvisation. Do you have any other words of wisdom as far as what you go to for inspiration on
Yeah,
on a
sure.
given day?
You know, I really like listening to the instrument. So when I like to warm up, I like to do long tones and listen to the resonance. And I actually find a lot of inspiration in that, and playing notes and just listening to it. You know, I find that that sometimes by just listening to the instrument, it really prepares my mind and my ears too for the practice session ahead. So I mean, I highly recommend, you know, when you start your practice, listen. It's, you know, and I say this to some of my students too. They might laugh if they're listening. It's, you know, it's a feast for your ears, you know, because when you're playing these long tones, there's so many rich overtones and things that you can hear, and I really enjoy listening to those.
Super, super. So let's say some people want to check out, and I'm sure they will, your YouTube videos. How would they find those?
You can just type my name into YouTube. Charlie Rasmussen. I think my account is Charlie Ras 03. I think that's my YouTube channel. And like I said, they'll be coming. The newest batch will be coming soon. But there's of course a list of existing videos that you can check out.
Great. Will they also be able to find out if they type in Charlie Rasmussen into a search engine for music, they'll also find your CDs?
That's correct. Yeah, if you go to Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, you'll find the CDs there. Mm-hmm.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks so much, Charlie. As we wrap up, I just want to mention that our guest next week will be Brett Rent. Did you ever cross paths with him?
I don't think
not familiar. I couldn't remember whether you overlapped at all or not.
Yeah.
But Brett is out in Colorado, and he is among the many people who play. Much of his cello playing is outside of the classical realm, and it is the country and folk and rock. So I'm sure he'll have some thoughts also on improvisation, but from a different stylistic perspective, and it's all good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because like you said, the style of improvisation makes such a difference. So it's like, really, for my improvisation, I'm really only comfortable in, more or less a Baroque or a classical style. If it goes outside of that realm, I definitely lose a lot of my comfort in that.
Right now. Maybe after you see Brett's thing, you'll be venturing out into new territory yourself.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. I want to give a shout out to the Whitewater Advertising Association and the website that they're helping to build. You Had Me at Cello website that's going to kind of expand on what this Facebook Live event is, and offer some other resources that people might find useful and hopefully inspiring as well. So watch for that maybe at the end of February or so. Otherwise, happy practicing all weekend long, and we'll see you next Friday.